We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
He said, what does patriotism mean? What is a patriot? I said, a patriot is an individual who is willing to stand up against one's own government when the government is wrong.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
Congressman tell me once, I said, why are you voting for this bill? Why do we have to tell the people what they can do and can't do? He says, you know what? He says, people are too stupid. And believe me, that is an attitude that prevails in Washington. Anybody that advocates big government, a lot of laws and a lot of regulations, a lot of taxation, they believe you are not capable of taking care of yourself.
This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
I endorse the idea of revolution. I endorse the idea of an intellectual revolution. And that's, to me, very important. So the intellectuals who have given us this mess that we have today have to be challenged on the issues themselves. For instance, the economic system that we're suffering from is not free markets. It's Keynesian intervention, inflationism, driven by a Federal Reserve that we need to get rid of.
Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose.
The role of government should be different. The role of government ought to be there to protect our liberties. The role of government ought to be there to provide a strong national defense. The role for the government ought to be giving us a sound currency, not a bunch or a few people in secret rooms that have monopoly control over the money supply and the interest rates. That's not in the Constitution.
It tells you you're depressed, lie down and be depressed. We have so many people who can't see a fat man standing beside a thin one without coming to the conclusion the fat man got that way by taking advantage of the thin one. So they're going to solve all the problems of human misery through government and government planning.
When the majority of the people change their sentiment, governments will change. Now, for too long, we, the people, have been too complacent. For too long, the Congress especially have been complacent and given up all its responsibilities and prerogatives in allowing the executive branch and the judicial system to run roughshod over us. Today, though, I am convinced the people are waking up and they said, enough is enough.
No government ever voluntarily reduces itself in size. So government programs once launched never disappear. Actually, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth. Federal employees number 2.5 million. And federal, state, and local, 1 out of 6 of the nation's workforce employed by government. These proliferating bureaus with their thousands of regulations have cost us many of our constitutional safeguards. How many of us realize that today federal agents can invade a man's property without a warrant? They can impose a fine without a formal hearing, let alone a trial by jury? And they can seize and sell his property at auction to enforce the payment of that fine.
It gives us the opportunity to work for excellence and virtue, which should be the goal of all of us in our lives. Because governments, once they get involved in dealing with making you more virtuous and more excellent person or more economically equal among you, the government can't do any of that without undermining your liberties. If our government decides that, well, we have to solve the problems of the world, we have to impose our goodness around the world, therefore you have to undermine somebody else's liberty. And you know what? I believe we can agree on the fact that the government we have in Washington, D.C. is too big.
They've called it insurance to us in 100 million pieces of literature. But then they appeared before the Supreme Court, and they testified it was a welfare program. They only used the term insurance to sell it to the people. And they said Social Security dues are a tax for the general use of the government. and the government has used that tax. There is no fund. Because Robert Byers, the actuarial head, appeared before a congressional committee and admitted that Social Security as of this moment is $298 billion in the hole. But he said there should be no cause for worry, because as long as they had the power to tax, they could always take away from the people whatever they needed to bail them out of trouble. And they're doing just that.
There is too much debt. The banks have too much debt. The mortgage companies have too much debt. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac has too much debt. There's too much derivative debt. So what did they do? They took all the debt, put it in the Federal Reserve and in the Treasury, and put it on the taxpayers. That's criminal.
That our government give up its program of deliberate planned inflation. So
it's not real prosperity.
He would stop the advance of socialism in the United States. I think that's exactly what he will do.
Cut government back to its constitutional size.
I believe that this is a contest between two men, that we're to choose just between two personalities. Well, what of this man that they would destroy? And in destroying, they would destroy that which he represents, the ideas that you and I hold dear. Is he the brash and shallow and trigger-happy man they say he is? Well, I've been privileged to know him when. I knew him long before he ever dreamed of trying for high office. And I can tell you personally, I've never known a man in my life I believed so incapable of doing a dishonest or dishonorable thing.
Freedom to me is so wonderful, and I have such confidence in how well it works if we can just protect that and guarantee that you have your God-given rights to your life and your liberty where our freedoms come from, not from our government. But we who believe in freedom, we don't even have to argue that, because history is on our side. History proves the freer the market, the sounder the money, the greater prosperity, and the more people that can enjoy it.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. Has faith that you and I have the ability and the dignity and the right to make our own decisions and determine our own destiny. Thank you.
Freedom is alive and well, let me tell you. Not only do we see the movements like this, but I go constantly to the universities, and if you have a true intellectual revolution, the universities will express it, and believe me, on the campuses of this country, they care about freedom, they care about liberty, they care about our Constitution, and they are going to be the next generation. We will have no magic cure in November. We will significantly see some changes, hopefully, and that will be good. But the major challenge will be when we have a dollar financial crisis and the whole system is going to be challenged. But intellectually, the belief in liberty is growing by leaps and bounds, and you are reflecting that. So I come here with great gratitude for having been invited, but I go away with great excitement and belief and enjoyment that I know so many of you care. Thank you very much.